was only when things got really bad and I was really worried about my health and what was going on in my body. So I started to feel really like I might die. And that was kind of when I realised how bad the mould had affected me. Hi there, my name is Sue. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm talking about my ongoing journey to heal mould illness on diet. Before we go any further, I have set up a group on locals.com, and I'll pop the address below. And the group is for anyone who's on a carnivore diet or ketovore diet. You don't have to have problems, but in particular, I wanted to set it up for people who are having problems on the carnivore diet. So people who have got things that aren't resolving, ongoing issues, whether it be mold illness, whether they suspect they've got mold illness, whether, they've got oxalate issues or gut issues, ongoing diarrhea, or, just whatever. I wanted to set up a group in the hope that we can get enough people in there who have had ongoing issues, that we can then provide support for people who are coming onto a carnivore diet or have been on for a little while and are still having problems, so we can support and tell them what we did to manage to resolve our problems. And so if that sounds like something that you would like to be part of, then go and visit the link below and set it up. So I started a carnivore diet a bit over 2 years ago. So May 2022 was when I started, and my health was pretty bad before I started on the carnivore diet. It had deteriorated a lot. It had become quite a concern for me, and I've spoken about that on some of my other videos, so you can go back and have a look at those. I'm not going to go into detail about what was going on, but when I first started on the carnivore diet, I thought it was nuts, but I decided to do it for 30 days. And within a couple of weeks, I had some amazing changes in my health. And so I stuck with it, and I'm still here. Now, through my carnivore journey, I've learned a lot about what's actually been going on in my body. I've learned a lot about mold illness. And so here I am just over 2 years later, still learning and still kind of adapting what I'm doing to try and heal my body. So I have to say that mold originally was not on my radar, but I've had quite a lot of exposure to it over my life, I now realise, looking back. And it was so much not on my radar that when I was 50 years old, so 10 years ago, I went to a doctor who was a functional medicine type doctor in Australia, because I had all this stuff that was going on with me. And he asked me if I had been exposed to mold, and I said no, because I didn't even think about, all the different mold exposures that I'd had, and it just wasn't something that I kind of considered was a problem for me. But the more that I learn and the more that I actually think back over time, the more I kind of realise that mold has probably been a problem for me for a very long time, and off and on through my life. And I think that my probably my prior mold exposures have contributed to what has happened over the last 9 years since we've been back in New Zealand. In the past, I've just blamed other things for my health issues. I've had stuff that's been going on for years, which some of could be put down to mold exposure, but I just thought it was, I just had a bad gut, or I just had hormonal issues, or I just had, thyroid problem or whatever, and all these food sensitivities and being really sensitive to supplements and chemicals and things like that. I thought it was just me. I thought it was just my genetics, and didn't actually realise that it could all be caused by mold exposure. And so because of that, because I generally don't go to doctors, very, very rarely, and I haven't had, a lot of spare financial resources to be able to seek help elsewhere. I've just kind of muddled along on my own, and have worked on, the different things, different symptoms that were going on with my health, to keep things under control without actually addressing the cause, which I now realise was possibly mold exposure. So when I look back at my life, at my history, even as a child, I was exposed to mold in our house that we grew up in, the main house that we grew up in. I'm not sure about earlier ones, but the house that I grew up in from about the age of 10 until I left home at 16, had a mold issue in the bathroom, I remember. And then I'm not sure about other homes after that, prior to us moving to Australia. We moved to Australia when I was in my mid-20s, and, like I was having all these gut issues and things when we moved to Australia. And then the first year that we were in Australia, we actually bought a car and a caravan in New South Wales, and we took off up to North Queensland, and we lived in Townsville for 6 months, and then we kind of travelled around some other areas in North Queensland. So what happened when we got to Townsville, we actually arrived there just after Christmas, and the rainy season hadn't actually started, or the rains hadn't started. And then once they did, and everything was really wet, what we found in that caravan, it had a canvas awning, or annex, whatever you want to call it. And we started to find that the kids' school bags and shoes and anything that was in the annex would pretty much go mouldy overnight. So we kind of remember that was a thing. I mean, North Queensland's known for its humidity and its mould, and so that was something. And in that canvas annex, there wasn't any kind of airflow really through it, and I guess that's why things were going mouldy. Now, we ended up swapping that caravan for a larger caravan because we were living in the van with the kids. We swapped it for a slightly older but bigger caravan. Now, when I think back on that van, so that van was from Townsville, and it had some leaks in the roof because it had been patched up with some silicone and stuff on the roof, and it had, some splits and kind of evidence of water damage in the ceiling in the caravan. But of course, we didn't think too much about it, and we headed on our merry way and travelled around, and then we ended up moving moving down to southeast Queensland and buying a block of land down there. And we lived in that caravan for 5.5 years before we moved into our house. So we were building a house while we were there. Once we bought the piece of land, and we built our house out of stone and timber. But while we were living in the caravan, those first 5 years that we were living in the Nango, my health really tanked then, and I didn't know why. I kind of put it down to maybe being homesick, and then in kind of later years, I think once I started to regain control of my health a bit, I started looking into things, and I wondered if I might have had tubal ligation syndrome, because I'd had my tubes tied just before we moved to Australia, and so that was something that I came across that kind of fitted some of my symptoms, but now I'm just looking back, I've just realised that it was probably mould, because what happened was we had the 5 years in the caravan, and my health it got really, really bad. So this was between the age of 25 or 26 and 31, basically. And so the last year that we were in the caravan, I actually quit smoking, started exercising, started to drag myself out of my bad health and lose some weight and all the rest of it. But for those 5 years, I gained a massive amount of weight. I went from probably I think it was about 70 kilos when we moved to Australia, and I went up to about 120. And I was suffering really badly with digestive issues, bowel issues, really bad anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts. I couldn't drive the car. I didn't drive the car for 5 years. And hormonal issues. My menstrual cycle was horrendous. I just had all of this stuff going on, and I didn't know why. And it wasn't until I actually quit smoking, which I think probably just getting rid of that extra toxin load just made a difference, and then me starting to exercise and that and get some weight off kind of helped. But then when we moved into our house, so it was probably within that first year of me quitting smoking that we actually moved into the house that we were building, even though it wasn't finished. And once I was in the house, everything changed. My health changed, and I just was so much better. Lost weight, and I just felt really good, and I didn't have the anxiety and the depression, and everything kind of went away, and life was good. And then that lasted for a few years. Then we moved to the Gold Coast, and we were there for a couple of years. When I was on the Gold Coast, things kind of went backwards a little bit again. And so I'm wondering if the places we were living in had a mould issue, or where I was working perhaps. I don't know, but the Gold Coast is more humid than where we than where we'd been living in Nanango as well. So more likely to be mold issues. And then we moved back to Nanango, and everything started to come right again. And I've never actually thought about this until just looking at all the mold information and kind of really sat thinking about my history. And so when we sold up and we came back to New Zealand the first time, we ended up living here in Te Araha, where we are now. And I worked for 4 years in the building with the mould that has affected my health this time. Now, when I worked in that building the first time, I had no comprehension that the mould could even really be an issue. And it didn't obviously affect me like it has this time, but I'm wondering if it did affect me because back then I was obviously, a lot younger. This was in 2000, between 2003 and 2007. And so I was a lot younger. We had an infrared sauna back then as well, and so I was using that pretty much every day, especially through the winter. Hubby and I both used to use it every day. I was doing a lot of exercise outdoors, so I was doing a lot of walking and running and training for triathlons and those sorts of things. So I was getting a lot more fresh air than I have been since we've been back in New Zealand this time. And so my lifestyle was really quite different. But I do suspect now that maybe the mold exposure from there contributed some of the health issues that I was having when we moved back to Australia. Because what happened was we sold up here in end of 2007, went back to Australia in 2008, bought a business that was incredibly stressful and that we'd been completely kind of ripped off, and then the 2008 financial crisis happened, and so we ended up closing the doors and walking from that business. The stress from that pushed me into an early menopause, which can also be a sign of mold issues. And then from then on, I have had these kind of ongoing health issues. I know that when we were still in Australia, at least one of the houses that we rented had a mold issue, because when we went to move, we realised that all the back of our TV cabinet and our drawers were all covered in mold, and we hadn't noticed until we went to move house. And of course, we took that furniture with us to the new house, and so the mold kind of came with us, even though we'd cleaned it off. And then when we sold up and we came back to New Zealand this time, I went back to work in the mouldy building where I'd been before. And that was when things really, really got bad. And so I'd been working in that building for about a year. I suddenly gained a whole heap of weight. My anxiety got way worse. Depression got worse, and gut health got worse. And I didn't kind of realise or want to know, I guess, that the mold was affecting my health, until I ended up with a cough that just wouldn't go away. And it was there. I had a cough for over a year before I moved my business home. But even when I moved my business home, the house that we were renting prior to this one had a bit of a mold issue. It used to get mold on the rubbers on the windows because it was really wet. The windows would get really wet, especially in the winter. And so there was kind of, I guess, an ongoing mold exposure there as well. So there's been a lot of mold exposure in my life. Now, I think, I look at, listening to different doctors and different people talking about mold, and my first thought was, well, how come some people end up bedridden with this. I haven't. But then when I think back to the way that I've lived my life for the last, 20 or 30 years, I've gradually eaten a cleaner and cleaner and cleaner diet because I had so many food sensitivities that I kind of had to. And I've used charcoal and bentonite clay off and on for years to control my bowel, the charcoal in particular. So they're binders and they take mold out of your body. So I'm wondering if my use of those sorts of things have kind of kept the mold burden or mycotoxin burden down a little bit in my body, even though I wasn't doing anything right. And, I was probably making things worse for myself in some ways. I'm wondering if that has helped at least a bit to keep me kind of functioning, because the charcoal and the bentonite clay, as I said, have been regulars, but I've also off and on for years taken chlorella and zeolite and all of these different things, because detoxing my body was always kind of on my radar, because I was aware that my body didn't detox well. And so now, even in the house we're in right now, we've been in here for 10 months and we're just about to move again. But this house seems fairly dry except for one room. So there's one room, bedroom, that has got obvious water damage. There's staining on the wallpaper and it has a bit of a musty smell. And so I'm wondering whether there's mold in behind the walls in that room. And I was listening to a guy who does remediation and testing in the States, and he was saying that if you open up the cistern in the toilet, and there's mold in there, there's a good chance that there's mold in the house, because he said he's never worked on a mouldy home that hasn't had mold in the cistern. So he said he's not saying that it's definitely an indication, but it's a possibility that it could be. And so I checked the toilet in this house, and sure enough, there's mold in the cistern. So it makes it really hard, if you're renting. I mean, we're renting these days, and it makes it really hard to be able to manage this, because, our landlords aren't going to clean up the mold if we suspect that there's mold in the house. And you don't, until you move into a place, you kind of don't really know. So we're hoping when we're moving into, it's going to be better. It's just all been renovated, and fingers crossed that it hasn't got any mold in there. So let's talk about the carnivore diet. So I know that some mold practitioners do recommend a carnivore diet or something similar to their patients. Judy Cho is one of those. She's a big fan of the carnivore diet and uses, she's a carnivore herself, I believe, and she uses the carnivore diet as a preliminary diet for patients with CIRS, which is chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which is most often caused by mold. It can be caused by other things, but it's most often caused by mold. And as I said earlier in the video, for me, going onto the carnivore diet just made a massive difference straight away, because I was having symptoms, dizziness, and I had vertigo for years, but this other weird dizziness as well. And when I got up in the morning, I'd have to sit on the edge of the bed for a minute or so, because otherwise I'd be wanting to fall over. I'd kind of feel like I was drunk. I've had quite a lot of years where I'd feel like I was drunk, especially if I didn't have enough sleep, or I don't know, just different times when I just always put it down to adrenal fatigue. But I'm wondering whether that was mold as well, because that kind of dizzy, wishy-washy head had been a thing for a very long time for me. And so I've been listening to different people talking about mold and mold illness for a while now, and just gleaning little bits from each of them, because they only kind of talk about bits of the protocol and bits of the treatment. And so if by listening to different ones, I've kind of been getting little bits and pieces. And of late, I've been listening to Dr. Sandeep Gupta. He's from Australia, and he provides some really good information on some of his videos. And so I had, after watching one of his videos last week, I kind of wrote myself up a bit of a protocol, because I felt like I had a little bit more understanding of the order in which to actually do this stuff, because my body is really, really sensitive still to some things, and it doesn't take much to upset things. When my body gets upset, the biggest thing that gets upset is my bowel these days, and has been for quite a long time. And so when I first started on the carnivore diet, and a lot of things got better, that was something that actually got worse, was my bowel. And it was really bad for over a year. I had really bad diarrhea, and it was driving me a bit nuts. But because I felt so much better in myself, and some of these other things had resolved, I kind of knew I was on the right track, but I didn't know why the diarrhea had got worse, and I didn't know how to manage it. And I was kind of trying different things, using lots and lots of charcoal, but I didn't understand why that might be happening. But I think I do now. And after listening to a lot of different people and doing a lot of reading, I think that what's happened with me is that I have mold colonizing my body. But listening to all these different doctors has been great. And the last couple of days I've been listening to Dr. Jill Christa. So the reason I stumbled across her was I was actually looking to see whether I would be better to add fibre back as a binder, rather than using charcoal and bentonite clay all the time, because I've been using charcoal for so long and it can cause nutrient deficiencies. And so I'm kind of a little bit concerned about that because I'm taking a bigger dose of it at the moment, along with the bentonite clay, which can also have a kind of similar effect. So I was thinking, I wonder if maybe I should use fibre rather than the charcoal and bentonite clay. And so I stumbled across an interview with Jill, and on that she actually explained what happens with mold and how it works in your body. And I've never heard anyone explain it before. And so what she said basically is, if you're living in a moldy building or working in a moldy building, you're inhaling the mycotoxins or the spores or both into your body. They go down into your, through your sinuses, into your lungs, from your lungs straight out into your bloodstream. And because they're fat soluble, they can go everywhere in your body. So they can get into your brain, they can get straight into the cells. They don't have to be attached to any proteins or anything. They can just go straight through, just march on in because they are fat soluble. And so then they end up, like you end up with some in the kidneys, and the kidneys go, oh, we don't want this is toxic. And so they'll flush that out through the urine, and they also end up in the liver because they're going through the bloodstream. They end up in the liver as well. And the liver does the same thing. It recognises it as a toxin, and so it wraps it up in fat and puts it into the bile. Now, when the bile comes out of your gallbladder into your digestive system, it does its thing and goes down into your colon, but only 7% of the bile is actually leaves your body through the colon. 93% of it is reabsorbed and goes back up and is recycled back through the liver again. And so you end up basically recycling this mold, mycotoxins and stuff, all these toxins from the mold. And so they're just going round and round and round and causing your body a whole lot of grief. And that can happen for the rest of your life if you don't get rid of them. And so after listening to Jill, I decided to kind of have a little bit of a change of plan and start using some psyllium and possibly some apple pectin to bind the mold and the mycotoxins. And I know with carnivore, one of the things is to get away from fibre. But when you've got mold in your body, then you might just need some fibre to help to sweep all that mold out. Because what the fibre does is it collects bile and carries it out of the body. So you end up potentially getting rid of more bile with more mycotoxins and more mold in it than you would otherwise. And it's funny because when I think back, when I first started on carnivore and the diarrhea was a real problem, I was experimenting with different things, and I went through a phase where I was having a bit of potato a couple of times a week, and then I did blueberries off and on for a very long time. Also slippery elm, this gut health product that has slippery elm and stuff in it, and they helped, and I wasn't sure whether it was the oxalate that was in them that was helping or whether it was the fibre in them that was helping. I had a feeling it was the fibre, but I wasn't sure, and now I'm kind of suspecting that it was, learning that fibre is actually quite a good binder. So since I've been on the carnivore diet, as I said, things have improved so much, and I know that I'm getting there. I'm absolutely getting there with this because I'm not having the dizzy spells, I don't have the nosebleeds anymore, that my anxiety is way down, depression isn't really too much of a thing anymore, and so many things have improved. But my ongoing thing is just the sensitivity in my gut, and I suspect that is kind of still maybe due to mold. The fact that I can exercise now is amazing. I have tried off and on over the last couple of years and hadn't been able to. It would just make me too tired. It would wipe me out for the rest of the day. So there was a real lack of energy in my body, whereas now I have energy, which is fantastic. So that's another really good indicator that I'm getting there with what I'm doing, and the results are happening, but it's just a bit of a taking its time. It's a long-term sort of thing, and pretty much always is for most people, I believe. So what are the symptoms of mold illness? I mean, they can be pretty much anything. That's one of the things that Dr. Jill Christa says, is that mold can affect everybody in different ways, even people in the same family. And because it can go to every part of the body, it can cause symptoms in any part of the body. And it's the mycotoxins in particular. So the mycotoxins are poisons made by mold to protect itself and to kill off other things. And so when we have mycotoxins in our body, it's basically poisoning us. And untreated mold illness can cause some really serious disease. I mean, it can cause cancer, multiple sclerosis, and dementia, all sorts of things, because it can affect all of those areas of the body. But common symptoms are things like anxiety and anxiousness, depression, mental kind of issues, chronic fatigue is really common with mold illness, food sensitivities and chemical sensitivities. So this was me. I mean, food sensitivities at one point when we were living in Australia, it felt like I was sensitive to everything. It didn't matter, like I'd change my diet and then it might seem okay at first, and then next thing, the new thing that I was eating was causing me problems. And so then I'd have to drop that and try and find other things that I could eat. So this was kind of ongoing. Mold illness can commonly cause histamine issues and mast cell activation syndrome. And I mean, that's been me, especially since I've been on Carnivore. It became really apparent when we were living in the other house in particular. So I ended up with histamine rash, which I did videos about. You can go back and have a look at that if you want to. And so then I learned about mast cell activation syndrome, MCAS, which I didn't know anything about prior to that. And I became very cautious about what I was eating and the aged foods that I was eating. That seems to be improving. I haven't tried having bone broth again, but I know that I can eat some aged foods and they're not too much of a problem. I still have a bit of a rash up here, which I don't know whether that's histamine or not, or it might just be a rash from, I don't know, oxalate or whatever. They all affect each other anyway, so who knows. Gut issues, bladder issues, bladder urgency, interstitial cystitis can all be caused by mold. Sleep issues, hormonal issues, weight gain, migraines, headaches, coughs, breathing issues. And so this is something that I have still had even up until recently, is I have this need to clear my throat all the time. I get this constant kind of feeling like there's mucus or something in my lungs, and my chest gets tight at night time quite often. Not so much the last week or so since I've been doing these other things. I've noticed it's been a little bit different, and the clearing my throat has been more on and off instead of constant. But so I think what I'm doing is helping already, but that has been a thing as well. And the other thing, which is quite a weird one, is getting static shocks. And so that's always been me for years. Like I get shocks in the supermarket, off the shelving and off the trolleys. And I'd give my husband shocks. He'd come too close to me and be zzz. And my clients, when I'm working on clients, I get shocks from just about every client that's on my table. And I've kind of got to the point where I go down and I go to touch their feet, because I'll quite often get shocks off their feet, and I'm trying not to hit them because I don't want to go slowly to them, because it's like and get an electric shock. So and I didn't know why that was until I really started digging into the information about mold just recently, and realised that static shocks is really common, and it can be a sign of mold toxicity. So there you go. So that's kind of where I'm at. So my protocol that I'm kind of following at the moment, as I said, I'm changing it up a bit. I'm going to take out the bentonite clay and the charcoal as much as possible. If I need charcoal for my bowel, then I'll take it, but hopefully I won't. And I'm adding in fibre, so psyllium and probably apple pectin. And I'm inhaling tea tree oil and frankincense from my diffuser every day. Humming, gargling to get the vagus nerve kind of going. And what else am I doing? Colloidal silver in a nasal pump. I've been going to do colloidal silver in my nebulizer, but I haven't got there yet. I've been taking, the other thing is I've started taking Saccharomyces boulardii, and now I'm not sure whether I should be taking it at the moment, because looking at Dr. Krista's information, she suggests staying away from all yeasts and stuff. Because it helps to bind apparently mold and mycotoxins as well. So a little bit confusing about whether to actually continue taking that or not. I don't think I've had any bad effects from it at this stage. So I haven't quite decided whether I'm going to keep taking it or not, but if you don't know anything much about it, it's actually found in lychees and mangosteens. Now, I had seen stuff in the past about Saccharomyces boulardii, and there was really conflicting information about it, and that's why I've never taken it. But it was originally discovered in the 1920s by Henry Bollard, so that's named after him. And the reason he ended up discovering it was he was living somewhere, maybe Vietnam or somewhere, I can't remember. But there was an outbreak of cholera, and he noticed that the people who were drinking this specific fermented tea didn't get diarrhea when the other people did. And so he ended up isolating this microbe in there, and because the tea was made from fermented lychee or mangosteen leaves and fruit, I think, and so he isolated this microbe and named it Saccharomyces boulardii. It can help with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and it feeds the bacteria, the good bacteria in our digestive systems and in our colon, and improves the numbers of those. And yeah, it helps to remove mycotoxins and molds. So I'm undecided about whether to keep taking it or not. I might keep taking it for a little bit at this stage and see how I go with everything changing. And so the fermentation is something that I've been on again, off again with as well, because I haven't been able to decide whether they're doing good things for me. I do know that the cheeses like Camembert and Brie with the mold on them just don't sit very well with me, and I keep forgetting, and I'll buy one, if we've got visitors coming or something, I'll buy one and eat it, and then I'm kind of like, I don't know whether that's right, I wasn't going to eat those anymore, so I must remember not to buy them. But she suggests avoiding anything with any kind of molds or yeasts, because she said if your body is dealing with mold anyway, then it's just going to see it as more molds coming in, which kind of makes sense to me. So no gherkins. We do eat gherkins occasionally, and they're done in vinegar, so no gherkins, no ferments, no fermented anything, no cheeses with molds. And I'll see how it all goes. So I'm going to write myself out another protocol, so I've got everything, because I put it up on the fridge so that I don't forget, because otherwise I forget to do things. And I'll see how I go, and I will do more videos talking about it. So if you have got any comments or questions, pop them below. If you're dealing with mold illness and want to know more about what I'm doing and how I'm going, then make sure to subscribe and follow along, because as I said, I will be doing more videos about this. And make sure to hit the like and share with anyone you think might be interested. I thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you again another day.